Hello again, everybody. Dan McTeague, President, Canadians for Affordable Energy. I've promised you another round talking about some more pitfalls with the net zero marketing scheme that governments have signed on to. This next one is not as well understood or well defined, but it could have significant ramifications for you, your bottom line, and for the country's future. It's the emissions cap that Environment Minister Steven Guilbeault wants to impose. Now, you got to understand that we have already a carbon tax in Canada. Everyone knows that. They pay for it. They get far less back than what they're paying for in most cases. We have a second carbon tax in which so-called emitters are required to either buy credits or pass those costs on, absorb costs or pass those costs on, things like refineries mixing more bioethanol into their fuel in order to make the achievement. But the federal government is not happy with that. It wants more. It wants more because, as we know, we're only talking about one product, CO2, which arguably isn't killing the planet. It's the main reason why we continue to exist. But put things in perspective, and I think the math on emissions caps really puts a lie to what the federal Liberal and NDP government is trying to do. And that's when you consider that the atmosphere consists of 0.04% carbon dioxide, of which man-made carbon is of 3% of that 0.04%, and Canada is responsible for 1.5% of that 3% of that 0.04%. It's pretty clear that we're going after an infinitesimally minuscule and inconsequential molecule. Be as it may, what the federal government's proposing to do is to shut down Canada's oil and gas sector. That'll be the gas sector that provides about 10 to 15% of the GDP. That's the entire economy of Canada. That's the one that pays 20 to 30 billion dollars every year. So you and I can go to a hospital and not have to pay for our Medicare. So you and I can drive on roads that are decent. So you and I can have a pension system that works for all Canadians. So we can continue to attract the brightest and best around the world, because an advantage in this country is our social programs. These are funded in large part by our resources, and prime among those resources is the oil and gas sector. This is a gas sector and an oil sector, and I'm not going to toot their horn. They're not fans of mine. I'm not fans of theirs. As I've mentioned in the previous iteration of this video, they lose tens of millions of dollars every year with my gas price predictions. I have no use for them. They have no use for me. But I can say that when it comes to going after this industry, I've never taken the view that we should eliminate it. Quite to the contrary, it is the very thing in a cold country like Canada, as inhospitable from a climate perspective that it is. Without natural gas, oil, propane, you wouldn't have much of a country, and you certainly wouldn't have the flexibility and the diversity of energy options that Canadians enjoy, which are very affordable. Instead, we have a meddler, the socialist himself, who I've called a Marxist in the past. Turns out I'm quite correct. We have Steven Guilbeault and his troop around Justin Trudeau out there trying to find ever more creative ways to shut down the Canadian economy. His background is littered with attempts at trying to control populations and to diminish the human condition. I'm not surprised. This is the same Steven Guilbeault who mocked those people at Walkerton 20 years ago when I was a member of Parliament, who were affected by E. coli, and said this is how it happens when you fool around with nature. This is a guy who tried to make light and try to, in some way, take advantage of the situation with Lac-Mégantic when that tanker car backed up and killed 30 to 40 people, because Quebec and many other provinces don't like to have pipelines where nothing like this would have happened. I digress. The reality is that by putting an emissions cap at a time in which the energy industry is already a leader globally, only hurts Canada. It doesn't hurt Venezuela. It doesn't hurt Iran. It doesn't hurt Saudi Arabia. It's not going to hurt Russia. So anybody who has any inkling about what they're really fooling around with, if you really want to open up this Pandora's box and pretend you're the sorcerer's apprentice and then not be able to close the damn thing, then at the end of the day, we have to ask ourselves as Canadians, how do you propose to make ends meet? The world is going to use more fossil fuels. The question is, do we want it responsibly made by Canada, or do we want meddlers destroying our ability to get our products to market? Don't take my word for it. When you have the Chancellor of Germany, Olaf Scholz, coming to Canada saying, can you give us more natural gas and oil? When you have the Prime Minister of Japan doing the exact same thing, and we turn around and say there's no business case. You have to wonder if it is because they are insulting people's intelligence or because Canadians themselves are being hoodwinked. Whatever this should be, the net zero fantasy and all of its subdivisions in terms of higher costs for things like clean fuel standard, for carbon tax, for mandates on electric vehicles, for building code requirements. How many more regulations and destruction does this government want? Put an emissions cap on Canada, you might as well put a cap on the future of this country and its political and financial stability. And that means you and I as consumers. If you like what we have to say, please look at our link in the description below. We need your help. We want to continue doing these things in a very meaningful way and get these messages out so that we can have a fundamental impact on decision-making and policy-making in this country long before it comes to hurt you. I'm Dan McTeague, President of Canadians for Affordable Energy. Look forward to talking to you soon.